guys excited? No? Yeah? Okay, so anyways, I'm JasonMaynard. I've got an elevated role up in Canada, field CTO, and I focus on strategic accounts and support customers throughout the entire country. And there's a couple things I've learned over the years. I've been in cyber for a while. I'll talk about me in a second, but I'll try to keep it brief. But the one thing I've learned is there's a lot of things that we've done as an industry for a long period of time, and I don't think that we're moving the needle. I know it sometimes feels like we are, and then you get compromised and you're like, what? And so I do believe that there's a better approach to things, or at least an approach that's worthwhile exploring. And so assuming breach drives better defensive outcomes. I believe everything you're about to do today, everything, regardless of the vendor, is going to fail. Right? And if we assume it will fail, then we have an opportunity to think of what is the adversary going to do next, and maybe start getting ahead of things. All right, so join that WebEx app room, and you'll be able to ask questions. I think the room, like, I even have rooms for 2 years ago that are still, nobody asks anything, but you can ask stuff well beyond the session. Don't obviously include anything personal in there. Email me direct if that's the case. Like credit card information, just send it me direct. Do not put it in, just kidding. But you'll also get the presentation. I'm going to put some links on here. I'll put some of this stuff on YouTube as well, so you guys can access it. The demos that I have in this session, there's much more than what's in this session, aren't narrated. I'm going to narrate them live, but then I still got to record them and narrate them, so there'll be a little bit of time before I do that. Oh. Let's see. Okay, a little bit about me. 20 years in cyber, so it's been a while. I've been an end user, a practitioner, and so I've been worked at a variety of corporations in Canada, but I've also worked for a partner integrator, so trying to make sense of what the manufacturer says between what the realization and operationalizing of the technology. And then ultimately, now I'm at Cisco. So I've been at Cisco for 13 years, and it's been an incredible journey for sure, especially always focused on cyber. I've been fortunate enough to be a distinguished speaker, keynote speaker at a variety of events outside of Cisco. I have a channel. Obviously, you can click the UR code, and remember, just credit card information. No, just kidding, no credit card information. What else? Again, big believer of assuming breach, right? Or assuming your defenses are going to fail and to drive better defensive outcomes. And then, finally, I get the question a lot about the beard. Honestly, it's funny. Nobody ever had said anything to me until I got the beard, and I get stopped every once in a while. I grew it during COVID. I got through the ugly period. I didn't have to go on camera, right? We were all at home. And then it finally fell out and started straightening out. So it took about 2 years, and now I can't get rid of it. Okay, so I don't think the clicker, oh, there it goes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the defender's challenges. We'll get into the adversary's capabilities, and then we'll look at the opportunity that defenders do have. And I do believe that there is a tremendous opportunity here. And then we'll get into some demos. So I'll highlight the lab architecture or what it could be, and then we'll leverage Caldera, an open source breach attack simulation tool that we can test some of these things. I was creative too. I'm going to say AI, whoever called me out on it. The one thing I love about AI is that I don't need to be a hardcore developer to be able to script things and automate things, right? I can get 90% of the way there, and then the human adds the 10%. But the same thing with breach attack simulation. You might need PowerShell scripts and things like that. You may not know how to do that, but you can ask AI and get you really, really close, including IPS signatures, right? For something like Snort version 3. I can go in there and very easily ask any AI tool, say, hey, create me a Snort version 3 signature. This is what I'm trying to do. And I did that in one example. I'm not showing it, but that's what I did to create the signature. All right. So anybody hear about frameworks? So think about 853, right? Tons of security and privacy controls, right? It gives you a great big list of things you should do. Then you've got ISOs 27001, 20002, and it talks about information security management. You got 800 maybe I can't move too far away, 800-207. And so that's focused on zero trust, if you're trying to drive towards zero trust. And then ultimately, you get CIS, critical security controls as well, right? Some best practices around implementing these. And there's a whole bunch more on top of this. And NIST 853 is probably one of the more common ones that people use, or a subset of it. They'll use that framework as the beginning, and then they'll maybe do some customizations to that framework. And many of you in this room are using this in any other framework, right? Wherever. The problem I see with it is, has it actually helped improve security? And probably the short answer is, yeah, I have to say that. This was a condition for us to use AI images. It has to say AI, and I have to include the prompt and how anyways, that was a condition for us to use AI images. But my point here is that we've been using these frameworks all the way up to now, right? And I would say the capabilities defensively continue to get better, right? Regardless of the defensive capability and vendor that you're using. They are getting better. So why are we still having this problem? And I think it's because we truly do not understand the adversaries that are targeting us and the capabilities. And I'm going to try to map these together. Okay, so we've got the frameworks, right? And there's way more than this. This is just a snippet because I can only fit so much on the slide. And then you've got products, right? So you've got this mandate of capabilities, and so then you go to market, and then you get products. And these products are things like endpoint protection, EDR technology, malware sandboxing. You got authentication, operational technologies, secure services edge, vulnerability risk management, encrypted visibility, workload security and forensics. It even gets exhausting calling this out, right? You've got things like container security, SIM and observability, hopefully business context. And you think I'm done. No, risk-based multi-factor authentication, web proxy, TLS proxy, quick proxy. You've got secure access services edge, firewalling, runtime security, network access control, cloud security, network security. And then you've got agentic and AI, right? AI and agentic AI. And there's more. Like, that's not even an exhaustive list. So we've got all these capabilities, maybe not every one of them, but we've got a collection of these capabilities. We've got these frameworks. Why? Like, why aren't we winning this game? And so what happens for you as the consumer of this is that you get every one of these capabilities and you start introducing them into the environment, and you build out some level of architecture to try and make all of these magical things work. And every color here represents another vendor. And if you look at cyber has thousands and thousands and thousands of vendors. It's complicated, it's convoluted, it's hard. You make magic every day trying to make this stuff work. You follow the frameworks, you buy capabilities, and hope to win the battle. And the short answer is, perhaps we're not winning the battle. So you get frustrated. You're saying, well, wait a minute, I'm doing a lot of the things I should be doing. I'm following the frameworks, I'm building and adding capabilities, and removing risk. I'm magically becoming the system god of those systems, making things work. Why are we still being compromised? And the problem is, it is complicated, but we truly don't understand the capabilities that we need defensively. We're focused on the framework, and it says MFA. Well, okay, I need MFA. But what in MFA? And I'm going to expand on this, that you actually need in order to secure it. And you'll never be 100%. Like, that's the one thing I'll say, is no matter what you're going to do, you're going to fail. And so the goal of a defender is to really make it muddy, murky, and sticky, because they will land. And so let's agree on this, right? So the first thing is, initial access is inevitable. It's going to happen. It could be a supply chain attack. It could be credential compromise, they just log in. Or maybe there's this thing around vulnerabilities and the number of vulnerabilities that are going to showcase in the next few months, weeks, and years, right? We're going to have a problem with keeping up with the number of patches, generally speaking. My point is initial access is going to happen. So if we assume that it will happen, what happens next? Let's get in front of it. Now, we want to do everything we can to stop initial access. That's the goal. But the reality is you'll never achieve 100% ever. And so the defender never actually needs to be 100%. You need to make it muddy, murky, and sticky. And so how do I do that? I start taking away capabilities of the adversaries that in fact are targeting us. So that's the first thing I need to do. The next thing is the adversary will never be 100% correct 100% of the time. This is to our advantage, right? They're going to make tons of mistakes. They don't know our environment, so they're going to have to make some noise. And if I make it muddy, murky, and sticky, then it drags it out a little bit longer, and that provides an advantage. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And as I mentioned, they're going to make lots of noise, right? If, for example, I need PowerShell to be able to move laterally in the organization, and you take PowerShell away from me as an adversary, meaning I need elevated privilege or it's not available to me for whatever reason, then guess what I have to do? I have to bring in a capability, right, as an adversary. If I have to bring in a capability, what does that mean? It's got to go through your next-gen firewall, email, or however I get that capability into the organization. Now I have an opportunity to scan it, put it in a sandbox, look at the behaviors, and mitigate against the risk. So I make noise, right? Every time you put a control in place. And this leads to what I think is the power move for defenders. It gives me time-based defense, right? It gives my people, my processes, and my technology more time to catch up. Again, the goal is not to defeat every adversary that attacks us. The goal is to make it hard that they never achieve the objectives they set out to do, whatever that might be, because compromise is inevitable. They'll make their way into the organization. Okay, so if we look at how best do we align this, to me, the best place to start is MITRE ATT&CK. If I use the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I have an understanding of the adversaries targeting my specific vertical, and now I can understand the capabilities. And then magically, if I could take that and map that to the defensive capabilities or frameworks that I'm using, that could be interesting. And I'll explain why that becomes powerful. So how many people here are in cyber? Oh, wow, that's almost everybody. And then network? That's everybody. Okay, cool. Okay, so the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So just to make sure that everybody understands MITRE, MITRE is a taxonomy of all of the capabilities that an adversary might have. And so there's two sides of it. It's what they're trying to do. So for example, break into a house. They want to break into the house. And then, so that's the tactic. The technique is the how. So I kick in the front door, right? Break in the window, right? Whatever. And so defensively, if you think about it, what we end up doing is, okay, I don't want my house broken into. So what do? I put an alarm system on. And someone walks by, they want to break in, they go, oh, alarm system, no. And they go to the next house, right? And maybe, though, they see the alarm system and go, what do they have to put an alarm system, right? I'm going to go through a back window, and so you have a motion, then you add a motion sensor, you add bars to the window, and again, that might be good for 99% of the threats. But what about the one that really wants to get in there? They bring in a new technique, and they put the ladder against the house, and they climb up and go through the top stair window that doesn't have the bars. And that's really what MITRE does, right? MITRE says, here are the whats. Like they want to do reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, persistence, escalation, right? Privilege escalation, discovery, and it goes on. Lateral movement, command and control, all the way to impact. And never in any specific order, but that's the goal for the adversary. They have these objectives in mind, right? And then the technique and the sub-technique are the how, right? So execution, how do I get things to execute? Well, I might need lateral tool transfer. I might need command and scripting, right? Interpreter, I might deploy a container. So there's lots of different techniques to support the tactic. And then on top of that, you have sub-techniques. So for command and scripting, you have PowerShell, you have WMI, you have lots of different options. And so it's hard, right? How do I map all of this out based on the adversary that's targeting my vertical to truly appreciate and understand the adversaries that are targeting me? And so this is where things get interesting. So I can go and look at the top adversaries that are in the industry. And so, you've got scattered Spider, you got Volt Typhoon, you got APT29, like there's a variety of them, right? And then they all have their certain suite of capabilities. So now that I understand the adversaries targeting my organization, I can then map out their capabilities. And you're thinking, that's nuts. Like, how do I do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. One is use MITRE ATT&CK Navigator. So it's a tool that you can use that you can go in and say, maybe I'm finance. So I got FSIs, or I look for FSIs, I look for bank, I look for things that are targeting or represent my specific vertical, and I search. And then when I search them, and I'm going to show you this, I then understand what are their capabilities. So I not only know all the adversaries that targeted my specific vertical now, but I also know all of the capabilities. And a lot of these are going to overlap with one another, right? Meaning an adversary here might use PowerShell, and an adversary over here might still use PowerShell. So when you take it away from one, guess what? Anybody else that uses it no longer has an ability to take advantage of it. And so with that, as an example, and this is for finance, there's all the techniques that the adversary uses. So we're not talking a million, we're talking, maybe 50, maybe 100 capabilities. And then you can start measuring them on how much risk they actually reduce. So for example, valid accounts, well, I think the latest report out suggests that credential access is the number 2 initial access capability, right? They use credentials. It used to be number 1. Does anybody know what number 1 is now? Vulnerabilities. Just moved into number 1 for the first time. It actually increased 31%. So, I didn't want to say AI again, but you said it. But here, valid accounts. If I can remove valid accounts, or meaning the adversary can't get the username and password, and I add something like MFA, they can't just log in, well, that removes it from initial access, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion. So I just take that away from those 4. But if I stop there, the problem is, how does an adversary get past multi-factor authentication? Well, they can, and I'm going to show you. Then the other opportunity, and the point here I'm trying to make is, it's not as hard as we make it out to be. And so when you look at the orange or yellow, depending on the color that you're seeing here, that section, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, and exfiltration, they need the network for most of these functions. So if I can reduce the adversary's ability to move laterally within the organization or send a command and control, use the network as the conduit, the facility to allow them to do the things that they do, if I can I end up taking a lot of these powers away from them. And you'll never be 100%, nor do you need to be 100%, because you need the business to operate, right? It's easy to turn the power switch off and everything's good, right? But we wouldn't have a job, at least not for long. Unless you're looking for a package, then maybe that's anyways, that's a different. Okay, let's see how this works here. So this is MITRE ATT&CK Navigator. Let me just fast forward it a bit here if I can. Maybe I can't. Okay, so I can't fast forward it. So I'll take a little bit, but MITRE ATT&CK Navigator, and so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do an FSI kind of mapping, or a finance mapping to MITRE ATT&CK. And so what we can do is select enterprise, mobile, and industrial, depending on the area of focus. We're gonna look at enterprise. And then all we have to do is come up here, we can do a quick search. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just saying, anything that's relevant to that industry. So so anything like banking or anything like that, it shows me the techniques. I don't care. In this case, I do, but I don't. There's the threat groups. There's 10 of them that's associated. I can select all of them. And then very quickly I come in here and I type in finance. And as I type that out, I see the threat groups. These might overlap here, and I don't care. I just want to select them all and get a complete list of all of them. And then I'll add FSIs, right? So again, there could be some nuance in the outputs, but you can fine tune that. But now I've got all of the threat groups that are associated to it. So everything in that little blue color, if you can see it, I'm going to change that color. And as you go through here, there's all kinds of different options. So you can get rid of some of the techniques, you can hide them, you can expand them. the point here is now I start to move towards a full list of capabilities, the adversaries that I'm concerned about that are targeting me. Pretty powerful. And so I'm going to go in here. This is where we can expand techniques. We can add some layers. We go into technique control. There's some toggling here, background colors. So you can play around. You can actually do a threshold, some green, some red, right? A rubrics type score. I'm going to make them all red. Let's assume I don't have coverage or I don't care at this point, right? At some point, you want them all to turn green, right? That you have coverage, or many of them. But now that I have this, what I could do is save this off. So I can save off this image, I can work with this image, and that's great. Now I understand the adversary, the capabilities that they have that target my specific vertical. And I give it a name and I download it, okay? I'm just going to continue to move forward here. So here's my point around understanding the adversary, but more importantly, assuming failure of every control that you put in place. So username and passwords is a great example. So, you know, username passwords, we already know that that's pretty easy to get. An adversary will find it, whether it's phishing, whether it's taking it out of memory and harvesting it, they find a way to just log in and be you, right? And so what we've done is we've introduced MFA to help mitigate against that. And it kind of helps, but then the adversary has lots of ways, whether it's SIM swapping, whether they're using reusable tokens within, you know, weak applications, or what they do is they MFA bomb or fatigue the user and just say, hey, guess what? I'm not logging in. And we all probably see that thinking, well, that's weird. No, right? But a user is just, okay, and they hit accept. And so that's how the adversaries always think, until you put the door there and put a lock on it, the adversary doesn't have to look at other things. They just go through the door. The moment you put the lock in place, then they start to explore how do they get around it. And sometimes the capability that we want to mitigate against the threat doesn't exist yet, right? The adversary's creative, comes up with a way, and the defenders scramble to try to figure out what they're doing. Sometimes it's not, right? So if you look at NIST 853, it says authentication MFA required. You put MFA in, and you don't think of this entire life cycle, then you get basic MFA. And in fact, you find that you are no more really secure than you were before. So we've got MFA bombing and fatigue. So what do? We add 4-digit codes. You have to enter a 4-digit code in order to authenticate. Now, the adversary logs in as the user, and the user sees this, but doesn't have the 4-digit code. Only the adversary does. So how does an adversary get past that control? How do they get the user to enter the 4-digit code? Now, they could be Rain Man, right, and just enter it and get it right, but likely they're not going to. So how does an adversary do it? Guess what? They call the user and say, hey, it's IT. You may have seen a prompt on your MFA device, right? We're testing an application. We had a security breach. Or maybe you don't say that, right? But maybe we've had a security breach. We're just making sure that the control's in place and working. Can you enter 4514? How often do you think a user is going to enter that number? Every time, right? And I talked to somebody today about that specific use case, because I brought this up and they're like, yeah, that happened last week. And so what happens now is, what we expect is that the secondary device has to be within proximity of the application in which you're logging into. So how do you get past that? Well, I call IT help desk. I know enough about the victim. I tell them I got a new phone. Can you please register my new phone into the system so I can log in? I can't log in. I got a presentation. It's happening right now. There's a whole bunch of people in the room looking and staring at me. Can you please add my phone so I can authenticate? Now, hopefully you have a process in place to help stop that, but that's how they initially were doing it. And then what we've done is we've added government third-party validation. So in order for you to get that phone registered, now you have to put ID in, scan your ID on your phone, it goes up and it validates through a third party. And now you can get in. My point is, again, if you stop the 3 ways down, guess what? It's only a matter of time before they knock the door down and get access to the environment. So that's why it's critically important to assume breach. So then what we can do is we can take the actual frameworks and we can map them to MITRE ATT&CK. So if they want, as an example, identification and authentication, and maybe it's MFA, maybe it's not just MFA. Maybe if I line that up to the capabilities of the adversary, I want all of those pieces in place, at least for the critical applications. Most likely you want to end up there. But if there's obviously a strong presence of capability for a specific adversary that targets you, you may want to go all in. And again, it doesn't mean that that's going to provide 100% security or effectiveness. What it's going to do, though, is shrink the attack surface and make it muddy, murky, and sticky. They're going to make mistakes. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, the frameworks are a mess as it is, right? Now you're trying to get me to understand the adversary and then map the two together. Like, what do you think? I've got no other job but this? And so I'll give a colleague of mine, Hussein, in Toronto, a little call out. We were collaborating at one point, and I said, you know what? I really think that we should develop something that cross-correlates these frameworks to help customers be able to take the capabilities, the adversaries, and map them into the frameworks. And when they're looking at the framework to drive the defensive outcome, map it to the capabilities, make sure all the capabilities defensively have been considered. And he's like, cool, I love it. And then I found this. MITRE ATT&CK has a mappings explorer to attack. And then my bubble got bursted and somebody already did it, right? Especially with AI, you can do some creative things, right? I don't need to be the developer anymore. I got to be the one with the idea and then kind of figure it out after that. So this already exists. And so this allows me now to go in, and I'll show you, I'll demo this here, is I can do it from multiple different lenses. I can take the adversary's capability and then map that into a framework or vice versa. So I can start in a framework, or I start from the adversary or the tactic and technique, and then go from there. So I go into attack objects. Again, I can set the versions, and I can very quickly go here and click on every one of the tactics, the techniques, and the frameworks that it aligns to. And you can see there's a bunch here. There's about 7 or 8 of them that they've got built into the tool. NIST 853 is certainly here as well. And I can very quickly see, oh, okay, well, this credential access maps to that specific framework and that specific item in order to achieve that outcome. And here I can cross-reference it. So maybe I don't know what valid accounts is. What is that? And I can come in here very quickly, read it. And then if I do look at the tactic and the technique, I can also see every single framework that aligns to it. So I can come in here and map this out. And there's tons of frameworks, as I mentioned in here. There's about 7 of them. So we don't need to create this. It's already done for us. We just need to take advantage of it. And now I can go in here and say, if there's specific items that are required in a specific framework, I can ensure the capability that I'm trying to overcome is considered in everything that we do moving forward. It doesn't mean you need to adopt it. It certainly means that you've considered it. And that now elevates our defensive capabilities because we're being more prescriptive. So you can see there's M365, attack sub-techniques, again, 853. And you can pivot one way or another, change versions, and get a true understanding of that mapping. So I thought that was pretty cool because this is what I wanted to create, and maybe we're just too late to the game. But I'm glad to see MITRE did it because I probably couldn't maintain it as much as MITRE has done. Pretty cool? I thought it was cool. Okay, so now another thing, just to make sure that I'm complete in the dialogue. Version 19 is out. Version 19 has taken defense evasion and split that up into 2 tactics. One is stealth, so some behavioral camouflage, like hiding defensively within the organization, and then defense impairment, so maybe you disable a capability. So they've broken it up, as well as they've added additional sub-techniques to industrial controls, and they've expanded coverage for AI techniques, social engineering, and mobile. So that's just the latest version, which is 19. That's out. Okay, familiar with attack chains? So attack chains are really all of the different independent observations that you detect in an organization, defensively, as well as the adversary's capabilities to attack you. So it'll be things like reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, credential access, and so on, right? All the way up into impact. And these are not in any specific order, right? An adversary may bounce around here. But essentially, what it is these are the capabilities of the adversary, and this is just a subset, obviously not a complete set, because I could never fit it on a slide. But my point here is that every one of these are things that they're trying to achieve based on the capabilities that they have. And there's nuance in that, right? My point here is that now, what if I took that and I map that to my defensive capabilities? So there's two sides. One is prevention, which is great. If we can block 100% of everything, that'd be ideal, right? Bad, meaning. And then there's the blue, so that's green. The blue would be detection, a process that we've implemented, or user awareness. And what I can do, and I was limited by space here, so I had a lot more content in here, but they wanted us to use a certain font size, so I couldn't get it all in here and fit. But my point is that if I look at it defensively, for reconnaissance, what are you gonna do here? Well, if I wanna get your external IP addresses, how do you stop that? It's very, very hard to stop that. So you don't have maybe a preventative capability here. You have an awareness, maybe. And so you make sure that you limit your exposure as much as possible, but you can't 100% defend against it. And then same thing with resource development. So if I need to bring in a tool into your organization to allow lateral movement because you've taken PowerShell away from me, and I go and build that, how do you stop me from doing that? You can't, right? So I can build it, but do I get through your firewall? Do I get through your, maybe not. And then you have preventative capabilities. So initial access is an example. Well, maybe you have user policies, you have multi-factor authentication, you have password policies, maybe you have password lists, passport type access, and so on. And as I go through this, I start mapping in some of the capabilities that exist. Right? So some of these could be technologies you exist today, some of them could be processes. It doesn't really matter, but the goal here is to have a true appreciation of the capability of the adversary and my defensive opportunity. That's the goal. And then you might be saying, okay, well, how do I map what I have from a tactic and technique perspective, right? What's that?
That looks familiar.
Yeah, it might look familiar. So one way of doing that is at least every vendor should provide you a tactic technique mapping of their defensive tooling. So everybody's adding that to their portfolio. But within Cisco XDR, if you have that, what you can do is go into MITRE ATT&CK coverage map and be able to identify every tool from Cisco today that you have enabled within XDR. Will tell you what tactics and techniques and sub-techniques are covered. And it also provides you a risk score, a financial risk score. So obviously the higher impacting technique is obviously higher risk to an organization, right? And we've done that based on analysis on breaches across the globe. So we've taken that data, we get an understanding of the adversary, how did they succeed in the organization? If credential access is seen in every single organization, maybe that's a higher financial risk. And I can map this out, I can play with it, I can pivot into each one of these. So really cool, right? At least a good visual. And I get an idea of what my coverage model looks like. Interesting, right? The other thing that we can do here is not only go in and pivot and understand each one of these capabilities, like deploy container. Well, there's no product coverage based on the selection I've done, right? It gives you the financial risk, so it is a little bit lower than maybe some of the others. But maybe I don't have any coverage here. And so maybe I need something in that space, and maybe I know what that is, maybe I don't know what it is. And so you can cross-correlate this and go right directly to MITRE to learn more about what deploy container is, what are the mitigations, maybe how can I detect that from happening in the environment? And again, you may not have a tool for this. That may be okay, that may not be okay, right? You'll determine that. So that's kind of neat. And then the other thing that you can do specifically, and I'll just fast forward this maybe not. The other thing that you can do, and I think it's going to show you next, but I'll get ahead of it, is that I can come in here, my product coverage here is a couple different products, so that's kind of cool. But as I scroll down, I can see the adversaries that use that capability. So there's that mapping again. But secure endpoint, so our EDR technology, I can actually see which ones are enabled or not enabled and then deliver that control from here. That's pretty cool, right? And again, exploit protection, cloud-based IOCs, you can do forensics with Orbital, but it gives you an idea and then some of the sub-techniques that are associated to it. Okay, still with me? Kinda, yeah? Okay, so the other thing I'm a big believer of is taking a use case. So understand your executive drivers, your threats and risks to your specific vertical, the adversary is targeting you, and then map it out. So you might have a use case, HR user needs to access an HR database in the campus infrastructure. So what does that control look like? So you can actually go through this. This is an exercise we do at Cisco for customers. We can actually go through this and map this out for you. So and with you. So what we can do is say, what are the capabilities? Well, I need EDR, I need malware sandboxing, I need vulnerability risk profiling, I need authentication, segmentation, malware sandboxing, risk-based multi-factor authentication. And then as I start turning the corner here, so some of these controls on the left top, are focused on the endpoint. As we get into the middle, you're looking at a network control. And as we start to come into the other service, we're now looking at capabilities on that workload. And so now we get microsegmentation, forensics, malware analytics, identity threat detection response, XDR, SIM, observability, business context. All of this now starts to map together. And what the goal of this doesn't mean this is comprehensive completely. You might say, wait a minute, there's something missing here. The goal of this exercise is for us to collaboratively look at this and challenge it, hack it, audit it, like as if that we are trying to compromise the environment, right? Just based on dialogue. And you might say, I have it here, but let's assume that if I come in and walk into your campus infrastructure and plug in, do I get an IP? And you might say, yeah. And I said, what if I'm running Kali? And you're like, I don't want that. Okay, well, maybe we'll want to authenticate and authorize and drive zero trust within the campus infrastructure, right? So we would add that capability here. So that's cool, but then what we do is we take this, and remember, these are all driven based on the executive drivers and threats and risks to the business. Then what we do is we take that and we say, okay, what is the coverage model look like? And so if you look at security, you can't, a green does not mean 100% of the time. I don't think anybody in cyber would ever want to sign off on that. And so the threshold for green would be whatever you're comfortable with. It could be 85%. If you acquire lots of companies, you're probably never going to be over 80, right? Or it could be 90, 95, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then, so we'll mark it green. So we have coverage, we're confident, because the reason why you don't want to give the illusion green is 100% is because you'll say EDR is there, and then they'll find out they got in by the endpoint, and some executive's saying, I thought you said we had EDR, it was green, it was green. Yeah, green doesn't mean there's no weaknesses, right? Then you have yellow or orange, which means I've got a capability in the environment, but I haven't turned on the capability. And again, this is agnostic to the vendor. This is all capability driven. And then finally, red is a gap. I've identified a gap. I know that gap is here. And again, now if I know the adversary and I know where the gaps are, maybe that's one of the things that I want to prioritize. Because if we know they have a strong capability to bypass or move laterally, maybe segmentation might be the focus in the data center environment. The other thing we can do to test this out is use breach attack simulation. So Caldera is an open source, there's Atomic Red Team, there's commercial tools like Attack IQ and Validato, but there's a ton of things that I can do. And what this allows us to do is safely be able to test our controls. It doesn't replace pen testing, but what it does is it allows me to schedule and automate breach attack simulations in the environment to test my controls. And this is also going to give me confidence in whether or not I've contained or mitigated the adversary's capability, because now I can emulate them in the environment. And so my lab environment has all these components, right? Firewalls, the Splunk, it's got Cisco XDR, and workload and everything. I can't show you all pieces, but not in this session. So what I've done is I've taken a couple of these and I built it out. So I will create a video on how you can install Caldera if you haven't on Docker. And there was one caveat with Caldera, was when I installed it in Docker, it didn't pull down the emulation packs. You have to actually manually. So I've included that caveat. If you run the bottom command and constantly get the live one, the latest, every time it's a new instance. So, right, every time you run it. So you may not want to do that. You might want to do the local build. Okay, so in testing, because people will say this, well, why didn't you just block it? Well, if I block it, then I have nothing to show you except it's blocked. So you got to think about that. Probably when you do the initial test, you want to be in audit mode, whatever audit means to whatever technologies you're testing. And you also want to make sure that you don't have other controls in the environment that don't allow the realization of the test that you're doing. Because again, you don't know if the tool would have blocked it if something else got in the way of it. That's all. The other thing is the BAS agent, or the breach attack simulation agent, has to be whitelisted, right? If not, Windows Defender or Cisco XD or EDR technology, they're going to block it because it looks like something that you want to block. And so some of these I actually went through and did both detection and prevention. And some of these I just did prevention near the end. So this is the example. This is a very simple example. So I use Caldera and I run they have the adversaries built in. So you can take APT29 and take out their capabilities and run it against your EDR technology. That's what I'm doing here. And so I got Windows 11, I've got our EDR technology deployed on the endpoint itself. I'm going to do detection and then prevention. So this is a little bit long. I think it's, let me just check. It's about 9 minutes, but we'll skip some of this. Let's see if I can just, why doesn't it let me do that? Okay, well, maybe we won't skip anything like that. So again, I've got Caldera, right? I installed the breach attack simulation tool on the endpoint. The endpoint communicates to Caldera, and then I run the commands from Caldera. So this is our EDR technology. What I'm showing you is I'm going into management. I'm going to show you the policies. There's no magic here. I'm showing you everything. And so what I'm doing is I've got two policies. One's audit mode, and here's the policy. It's all set to audit or disabled. I ensure that there's no preventative capabilities to mitigate against any test that I'm testing. But I expect the tool, and you don't get this with every EDR, but I do expect the tool to tell me that it's seen it, but it couldn't block it. And then I've got a protect. So now I've turned on the muscle, right? I've turned on all of the capabilities that could prevent the adversary from succeeding. And not everything will be prevented, right? So if I use a command and just scour the network, I might be able to do that even in prevention mode. It might alert me, but I might be able to still do it because there's nothing that stops it or prevents it. And then I'm showing you the groups. It's in audit mode. So again, no smoke and mirrors. It's currently in audit mode. I download the agent, and I'm going to go ahead and deploy. Well, I'm not going to show you the deployment because obviously you don't care, I hope. But what will end up happening now is now it'll be installed, and then we'll go ahead and run into Caldera and run the execution against it. And I'll explain that in a second. Now I've installed it, so I fast-tracked the install. I pulled it out. I went into devices, and I'll go ahead. That top device is the device that we just installed. And again, it's in audit mode. And again, I'm just being comprehensive here to make sure that you can see it end-to-end. There's no smoke, there's no mirrors. It's the real deal. I go to the endpoint. There's the IP 249. And then I just went in to ensure that that audit policy is enabled on the endpoint. So it's there. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this script. This script is to install the Caldera agent. Remember, this is excluded from EDR detecting it. So that's it. And again, that's in Caldera. When you go to download it from Caldera, it gives you the script, the PowerShell script to execute it. I refresh. This is Caldera. I can see the agent. It's elevated. It was installed as administrator, and it's alive and active. Then I can go into the operations. I'm going to call this APT29. I'm going to select the adversary APT29, and there's a collection of capabilities that they have that we're going to run against this asset. The group that's installed, it's the red team. I got some other features like don't start right away. I'm gonna start this and let it run immediately. And it's gonna go ahead and start doing stuff. Obviously, I'm not gonna wait or have you wait to go through each one of these, but there might be 20, 30, 40, 50 different attacks that the adversary will use. And it's already starting to light up. So I can come in here in EDR, I see the tactic that the adversary is using. I can also see the exact file path, the file name. I can take action from here as well. So I can block it if I wanted to, and I think that's important too. You gotta have something to be able to respond when you wanna respond. Again, this is the test, so I'm okay with that. And you can see, look at, it's lighting up like a Christmas tree, which is great. And then I can cross-correlate it of what tests were successful, what tests failed, understand the tactics, the techniques, and what my coverage model looks like. And look at this, even PowerShell here. I can see EXE, PowerShell, oh, but wait a minute. Okay, Splunk D, guess what Splunk D is? That's my BAS agent. So if we're trying to masquerade it and hide it, it sees that PowerShell, and look at that, that's the exact PowerShell command that was run on the endpoint. It detected it completely, right? If I jump into XDR, again, I'm looking at this specific one. I know it's executed by IT. Here's the entire attack chain that I showed you earlier that you can visualize this in XDR. And if I click on this, I can see all the processes and the relationships between each process and who did what. So I should see splunkd.exe, even though it's not supposed to. That's what I named the agent. It used PowerShell to execute that script and obviously succeed on that endpoint. So I'm happy to see that I'm be able to detect many of these. But here's one that didn't work. So it shows that it failed, meaning that I didn't stop it. But when it tried to look for the domain, it wasn't able to look for the domain because it's only a work group. But it gave me information to let me know it didn't actually fail, right? What failed was I'm not part of a domain, so it couldn't look that up. Okay, so that's that side of it. I'm gonna probably fast track this a little bit. But basically then I turn this into prevention or protection and I run it again. And what you'll end up finding is some of the same things. Like if I'm looking for a domain and I'm part of a work group, that's gonna show failed. But the one piece that's interesting is that there's a process injection attack that took place that we did audit and we did see it and we did but we didn't stop it, right? Because we were in audit mode where that's an expected outcome. When I turn it into prevention, now all of a sudden, I have the ability to mitigate against that attack. And I, in fact, quarantine the execution of that particular element. Again, so these are some of the successes, right? So yeah, so I'm able to run a command and look for directories or things like that. Like that would be common anyway. You wouldn't be able to, but we at least give you some visibility potentially into that. And here's another one. Oh, wait a minute, it tried to run psinject.ps1 blocked by antivirus software. This is in Caldera, and it's telling you that. So again, you can pivot and look at the data that you get in EDR and then XDR and get a confidence level that you have a capability here. And you can see that quarantine succeeded here. So I can click on that and get additional details. All right, this one is just an atomic test. This one's interesting. So I use Kali, again, Windows. So atomic is just an individual attack, and I did a couple of these. And the point here is that I can use any AI tool that you might have to be able to create Caldera elements that I can run against the endpoint or the network or. And so again, I can see that I'm gonna, this time, the agent is active, so I know I'm good. I've got some XDR analytics. It's the red team. I'm not gonna do any advanced features. I'm gonna go ahead and start. And now I'm gonna manually ingest some capabilities. So this isn't built into Caldera, but these are things I can do with Caldera, which is cool. So again, PowerShell script that's gonna use cert util, and it should light up somewhat like a Christmas tree, because that's obviously something that could be nefarious. And I can do it based on PowerShell, or I can use a command as an example. So again, you can use AI to help build these for you to do some testing that in regards to the adversary. I'm gonna go ahead and run a couple of these, and you can see there's some success that's taken place. And obviously there's some nuance in that, right? One could be that I'm in audit mode, and so success is probably going to happen. And I can very quickly just cross-correlate my detections in XDR to see what is actually, oh, wait a minute, there's a related incident to this one of Netcat being used in the environment. So sometimes we'll piece these individual observations together to say that there's been previous activities that created an incident on that particular asset, which is important, right? Because now maybe what you're looking at is real because there is some history there. And very quickly I can come in here and see the details around it. So this is just showing you, some of the capabilities. Here's the exact command that was ran and everything else. So again, cool. And then the other thing is you have things like cloud-based IOCs. So you may not be able to prevent it. That's okay. But maybe a detection capability comes later in the form of a cloud-based IOC, right? So we run analytics against this. We use XDR. And we said, wait a minute, based on this command line that was introduced to the environment, this is an indicator of compromise. We're going to let you know about it. Again, this is just showing you some of the raw details around that. And then again, you can go into EDR and see exactly similar events. The goal of XDR, as we know, is to take all those different capabilities that you have defensively, Cisco and third party, and digest them into one place and then make sense of all of those independent observations and build the relationships between them. Because that's the hardest piece, right? Again, there's a behavioral detection capability here. And again, we can see PowerShell. There's the command that was ran. We can also see it's got something to do with XMRig. There's the cloud-based IOC that was detected. So you've got multiple opportunities with multiple different technologies to either detect or prevent. And again, some details around the cloud-based IOC. The other piece here is around the firewall. So what I've done here is I've got Kali running a Netcat listener on the one side. And then what I'm going to do is use PowerShell to go out to the internet, download Netcat, and then make a reverse shell into Kali. Again, I'm doing this safely in the environment, but I want to see is my firewall going to stop that? And so what's interesting here is, see this little element. So this is the signature. Again, you can use AI to help build this. When the reverse shell happens, as it's coming back, what they're going to end up seeing on the Kali box is that I'm in a Microsoft Windows version. So that's what it's looking for. If it sees that, then what it's going to see.
Did you decrypt to see that, or were you able to get it?
No, this isn't. You don't need to decrypt for this. So you could use Netcat with an encrypted channel. And then obviously then decrypt would come in. But I did not here. A little bit more work for me. But if you're, well, here's the thing. If you have a next-gen firewall and you don't have decryption turned on, I think it's like 98% of traffic in North America or US specifically is encrypted. So that means you're really using it for nothing if you're using IPS and malware. Like you're doing nothing with the box. I think globally it's 90%. Okay, so this one here, again, I created the signature. It doesn't exist. So I do the test first. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Why doesn't that play? See, it should, on click, automatically play. Come on, get out of there. Yeah, I have to hit space. No, even space didn't work on this one. Let me go back, because this one's cool. All right, just give it a. Oh, is it playing? Yeah, okay. Is it still playing? Yeah. Okay, because my screen just went, like every tile is up there now. Okay, so again, this is detection. So we're in Cisco Secure Firewall. We're going to go to policies. We're going to go into firepower threat defense. We're going to go into data center. This is the actual policy for the next-gen firewall. And we've got this policy. So we'll go ahead and edit it. And all I want to do is show you that there is this internet out policy that's associated for IPS. And I do have a variable set to make sure that it understands what internal and external. This is a lot of misses on our next-gen firewall. You want to give the IPS perspective of your environment. So the variable set helps do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into policy, and I've embedded that signature that I mentioned earlier. So I'm in intrusion prevention, Snort version 3. I imported that signature exactly the way I have it in the slides, and I import it. And now I'm just going in and checking to make sure that it's enabled for my policy. And you can see that if I go into rule overrides, there's that policy, okay? And it's set to block, and it's now enabled. But I'm in detection mode. I'm not preventing. Because if I prevent it, sure, now you know it's blocked, but you might want to see additional details, right? You don't know if the signature might be working or was it something else that caught it. So I'm adding, now I'm in Kali, I've opened up Netcat as a listener on 4444. I can see it's elevated, it's active. I go into operations, or sorry, operations. And then I go ahead and give it a name, right? So I'm going to say NGFW, IPS, detection, or something like that. And red team, go ahead and hit start. You guys seen this already. We'll minimize that. We'll go ahead and put a manual command. So this is a PowerShell script that's going to go out and download Netcat. Now, if you had that, you could probably, just malware inspection, most likely you could have blocked that coming inbound. But we don't have that because then you can't see whether or not it works. So again, what's going to happen is this is going to run in PowerShell. It's going to download Netcat, and then it's going to run Netcat to that IP address 4444. And if it works, what we should see here is a reverse shell. Oh, there it is. And there's that little, see Microsoft Windows version? So if I went and looked at the version specifically, then if it's a different version of Windows, I would never catch that signature. So that's why I stopped that version. And you saw I did a directory listing, and I saw, like I had full access. I was administrator on that box. Now, if you go into Cisco Secure Firewall, I can see that the IPS or IDS policy in this case actually detected it. I can see it here, and it says would have blocked. So we actually tell you that the policy would have blocked it, which is cool. Because now all I have to do is just move it into prevention. So what I've done next is I've taken that policy. I see the command again over here. I see the, sorry, not the command, the alert. And all I do is go back in and I change it to prevention, and I run that same thing again, and guess what happens? It blocks it. Now I can show you that or move on. Or you can just trust me. I'll try to move on. So again, I just run it and it will block it. Okay? Let's see if this still works. Can I? Oh. Oh, good. Okay. The other one's secure access. I'll just give you a quick one on this. So what I did was I, again, leveraged like a ChatGPT or something like that and said, look, I want to just pull a PowerShell. I want PowerShell to go out and just test these domains against my DNS layer or web proxy layer capabilities. And these are this example malware domain or botnet or internet bad guys. These are all things that we have marked as bad. So you can test them even if you have other controls in the organization to ensure that you have a policy in place, which is neat because I don't have to worry about, you know, some upstream or downstream capability of blocking these. It'll get through all of those, but we should ultimately show it as blocked. I also do DNS tunneling and then DNS exfiltration using DNS exfil. Okay, this is the last one, and then we'll get to the end here. I just have to work with this because if I hit a button, it's game over. Okay, so I'm in secure access. I'm going to threat categories, and I'm showing you every step to make this work. So we'll go ahead and give it a name. In this case, we'll call it BAS threat category, and I'm going to enable these categories. So every one of these. And most of these should be enabled. If you have DNS layer protection, you probably want that. It's a first line of defense. But I'm going to turn these on. I am going to be in prevention mode, so I'm expecting a block action to take place. Then what I'm going to do is very quickly come in here and create a security profile. That security profile is going to use that threat category that I just created. So think of threat category as an object. The object's created, then we put that object in the security profile. That security profile, in fact, becomes an object that you could use an access policy. So I enable SSO. When I enable SSO, automatically decrypt becomes enabled. So you want to make sure your certificates are out and the users don't get, any disruption there. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit that threat category, hit save, and then that's pretty much it. I have now the policy in place for that particular preventative capability. And so now what I could do is very quickly go over to access policy, add an access policy rule, add that profile I just created, and it ties everything together. I already have one here that's going to block this, but I'm just showing you there's lots of different ways. I can do it based on user, I can do it based on a tunnel group, there's network construct, there's lots of ways to define what it is, the source, and then ultimately the destination. This is an allow policy, because if it's blocked, then it doesn't matter. This is an allow policy, but it should block everything in that threat category, because I've marked them as such. Okay, now I've enabled it. That's all you have to do to enable it. It shows me all of the list of domains that I am going to block, or threat categories that are associated. So any domain that falls under those should be blocked. Obviously, the ones that have been classified by Cisco certainly should be blocked here, right? Because this is our test. Okay, again, you saw this. We're in Caldera. We go to operations. We go to new operation. We give it a name. Again, red team. We can do things here like obfuscate the data, like make it a little bit harder, but it won't matter in this case. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a manual test across each one here. Okay? So let me just see if I can. So I'm not going to bore you with each one. So all I did was enter like 6 or 7 of those, right? PowerShell script. So each one's just going to a specific domain, including the DNS tunneling and DNS exfiltration. Oh, guys, I wish this was easier. I wanted just to fast forward it, and I thought I could do it. Okay, well, I'll just talk to it. You got to trust me on it, so I apologize. But basically, I run that test, and it blocks the easy stuff. So the malware, the botnet, like all of that gets blocked. The two that don't, which is interesting, one is the DNS tunneling doesn't get blocked, but I use example.com as the thing to allow the DNS tunneling to take place, so the domain example.com. And it comes in and it classifies that as a domain of, I think, resource development or something like that. So it knew, it was smart enough to know that the domain I was going to, yeah, you're not actually DNS tunneling. And so I'd have to create something to be able to do that. The exfiltration one failed because it wasn't able to, what was it? Oh, it wasn't able to pull down the exfil, the DNS exfil piece. It wasn't able to download it, right? So it wasn't able to execute it and move the attack forward. And then I also get security endpoint findings. So this is, again, tied to that tunneling element that I mentioned earlier. So if we go back to the business flows, and I'm almost done here. I know we're at the top here, but it's one more slide after this one, I believe. But what I can do then, whether it's Cisco or other capabilities, what I can start to do is map where each of those capabilities fit into the environment, and then build out an architecture that allows us now to seamlessly pull this stuff together. Did I go too fast here? If you wanted that. And again, this is all Cisco in this particular use case. That doesn't mean that's true always, right? First off, you may have other investments that you love. And so there'll be different colors here to represent those vendors. But the idea here is to get and shrink the number of vendors to remove you from being the system integrator and focused on more value to the business, right? Like stopping real threats that threaten the organization and not having to worry about doing too much of the gluing. And so then you end up with an architecture, in this case shows Cisco, but again, it could be a collection of capabilities that are introduced. So in summary, you'll never ever achieve 100% prevention, right? Regardless, no matter how good the team is, what products you implement, the processes that you're going to have, like we have to start assuming everything we're going to do today is going to fail. Doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means that we've got to think about what's next. Understanding the adversaries, I truly believe, based on the vertical on which you support, if you understand it, you build better overall defensive capabilities. frameworks and more frameworks hasn't won the battle. So aligning it to MITRE ATT&CK and the adversary, I think, is advantageous. The other thing we didn't hone in on, lateral movement is almost key. I think 70 to 90% of breaches involve lateral movement. If they land, that's not where they're going to end up, right? They need the network to expand. And so lateral movement, if you just take that one piece away, man, you start to shrink the adversary's ability. And then obviously you can do things like breach attack simulation. So that doesn't, again, red teaming still needs to be done. You need a human sometimes to come in and test. But the problem with red team is it's only as good as the person doing the test and the time of which the test was done, right? After that, it's null and void. Yes, you've got some actions to take advantage of, but it's null and void. Breach attack simulation, however, can be done once a week, once a month, every new service. You can constantly test your controls. And then finally, what do we want to make it for? What do we want to have our environment look like? We want muddy, murky, and sticky, right? It's never about having a wall and saying that we're secure, but it's making it very difficult for the adversary to achieve its outcome. Doesn't mean they don't get in, but it does mean that they're never going to achieve their objectives. And that's it. Obviously, please submit the survey at the end of it, right? We obviously love the feedback. It's important to us, and we do get measured on it, so it is pretty important. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Can't believe some of you guys stayed right until the top. Yeah.